All right. Hey fam, I'm gonna, as promised, talk about the spooky shit that happened in my old house because we don't live there anymore. So now I feel like I can. Like maybe it's safe, right? I don't know. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, then you probably don't follow me on TikTok, and you should. I'm just saying. Okay, so either way, I'm gonna tell you about the spooky shit that happened in my old house, and I still don't have a good explanation for this, okay? Like, I know something happened. I know many things happened. There were multiple witnesses to weird things that happened. But it 100% could have been like a real flesh and blood person. It could have been a stalker or a homeless person or some sort of transient. It could have been some sort of violent criminal. Like, it could have been a flesh and blood person, okay? But it also could have been something stranger. So, I'll let you guys decide and you tell me what you think in the comments, okay? So, initially, when we moved into this house, it was a rental. It was built in the 1970s. It was a cute little yellow house, all right, in like the heartland of Nebraska, all right. Um, Now, the only downside to this house is because of the way the housing market is in Nebraska, especially when it comes to rentals, and in the particular town that I was living in, like rentals were super expensive. So my rent was $1,000 a month, and this place was cute, but it definitely had not been maintained. Like within 48 hours of us living there, my oven shorted out and almost caused an electrical fire, and it took my landlord 3 weeks and me threatening a lawsuit to get them to replace my oven that I used to make meals for me and my child. Okay. Also, there were these big cracks in the ceiling downstairs, and the supporting wall, so if you walked into the front door, there was like the living room. All right. Like, walk in the front door, immediately upstairs is the staircase, and then you can go to the right a little bit, and there's like the living room, and there are these big cracks in the ceiling. Okay. And if you keep going, there's this very like 1970s style wall where like the wall comes up to like here on me, and then there's like a window cut out, and then a little bit more like 2 foot more section of like ceiling to floor wall, and then a doorway. Hopefully that makes sense. But this like window section wall was literally buckling. Like it was buckling so much that there was probably like a Coke bottle's worth of wall that was sticking out like it was an actual hump, okay? So to make things more interesting when it comes to this house, like we moved in, and initially, I had a friend who moved in with us. She was going through a divorce, needed a place to stay. Like, neat, all right? It's only $1,000 a month. It's a 3-bedroom house. That's pretty much a steal in the area that we were living in, even given the fact that like the wiring wasn't great. There were cracks in the ceiling. The wallpaper was peeling. Like, this was still considered a really cheap house for the area that I was living in. Okay, like we're talking like slumlord type conditions. Such is life, all right? But so initially this girl moves in and everything's fine. We were really good friends before we lived together. Okay, and she actually lived with us for a little bit in our old place because of the divorce, but it just wasn't enough room, so we decided to get a bigger place together until she could get on her feet. Neat, right? Other than like she got very reserved and very quiet and very sullen and would hide out in her room all the time. And she would tell us that, like, she doesn't feel welcome in the other parts of the house. She feels like it's our house. And it led to all of these weird tension points about food in the fridge and, like, regular roommate arguments, except we never had those arguments before. And if we were going to have those types of arguments, we probably would have had them in the even smaller place where we were sharing a space and, could barely walk without stepping on each other, okay? So it ended with basically us having an adult conversation and being like, hey, in the interest of our friendship, you gotta move out. One of us has gotta move out, and I have a kid, so it's not gonna be me. And she was totally chill with that. Like, it made sense. Okay, that probably sounds bad, but it wasn't. So she moves out, and that's when things started to get like stranger. All right, so my bedroom was upstairs. So if you go upstairs and to the left, there's a bedroom. But keep in mind, the ceilings up there are like slanted and super low. Which means if you're a full grown like man, you can't really walk in the upstairs. Like, I'm 4'11", and there were parts where I would hit my head on the ceiling because of the way it slanted down. Okay? And then the other side was like this big area that we turned into an office space, which was really nice for working from home and things like that. But in the upstairs, there were all of these different little doors, okay? The little like 1 foot by 2 foot doors that go into the crawl space. And this is again a very much like throwback sort of thing where you would have multiple doors that would open and give you crawl space access, right? Except all of those doors were nailed shut. And I don't mean like, oh, hey, the landlord put in like 2 screws to keep people out of them. I mean that like it was as nailed shut as it could be. There were 4 screws across the top, there were 4 down each side, and 4 across the bottom of the door. Like you would have to take every one of those screws out or pry it open or something like that. And on top of that, because I got weird and curious, okay, like on top of that, on the other side of these doors, you could hear something moving. I heard it. My son heard it. My cats would hear it and react to it. So did friends who came over. And this is part of the reason that I lost 2 nannies in that house, is because they could not stand to be in the house if I wasn't there. Because they would hear something constantly like skittering and clawing in the attic, or they would hear something like almost like footsteps walking back and forth, okay? So I got curious and I tried to open some of these doors, and some of them were fake and some of them were real. But the real ones, on top of being like the doors itself being screwed shut, they were also plastered shut. And I didn't realize that until I tried to like crack them open and saw that there was like plaster on the underside of the door. So that was a whole lot of nope for me, and I decided not to mess with it, which was probably a good life choice. But the entire time that we lived there, you could hear something moving in that like attic-y crawl space. And it got to be something that we were weirdly used to until things escalated again. Things kind of hit this weird like level of normal where like, okay, so at one point all of my butter knives in my house disappeared, which was a weirdly specific thing, okay? All of the butter knives in the house disappeared. And then like a couple months later they came back. And then all of the drinking glasses disappeared. And then a couple months later they came back. And not only did I look for them and my kid looked for them, but also whichever nanny was involved at the time would look for them. And we went through so many nannies in this house. People would just up and quit on me constantly. And this was never an issue that I had before, okay? Just something was off, all right? And this probably sounds super crazy, but I'm just recounting it the best that I can. Again, I probably should have rehearsed this, but I didn't because that's not me. So things would disappear in sets. There were the butter knives and then the drinking glasses. There was my son's pants. And then his pants came back, but all of his shirts went missing. And then his shirts came back, but my underwear went missing. And then my underwear came back, but then all of my like earring backs went missing. Not the whole earring, just all of the earring backs. So this continued in some sort of like status quo, I guess, of just existing with random shit disappearing and popping up in other places in my house and places that we knew that we looked, and weird footsteps and all of that kind of stuff, okay? The room that my old roommate had initially stayed in, my son would not go into that room. He still says that that room scared him, but he doesn't know why. And we tried to make that his bedroom at one point, and he would not sleep in there at all. So that was also a weird thing. And then a year before we moved out, I decided that we were going to move out. And that's when shit got bad. Like bad. So I started looking at different places. I was looking at buying land and we were going to build a house. That's why I started looking. That's why I renewed my lease and then started looking for a place, which I know is weird, but we needed a place to live while the house was theoretically being built. Yes, I know it takes longer than a year to build a house. Okay. But, point of story is that's why there was that time difference. Okay. So Started like, it started with the dreams, I think. I would have these dreams that my bed was shaking and somebody would jump on the bed and scream at me to get out of their house. But I could never see them. I could just feel that pressure of somebody jumping on the bed, and the whole bed would shake and they would scream at me to get out of their house. And then I would wake up and there would still be that pressure, but then it would go away. And that could just be a nightmare thing. That could be related to night terrors, sleep paralysis. I have no idea. Okay. Yes, I've had nightmares before. I have PTSD, so I've definitely had night terrors. I've never had sleep paralysis up until living in that house. And we've been out of that house for 2 months and I haven't had it since. So do with that what you will. Okay. So I would have those dreams of get out of my house. But it was this very in complete opposition to everything else that was going on in the house. So the real escalation was I started putting stuff into boxes because I'm a planner and I do shit in advance. So I started putting stuff into boxes way beforehand, packing up non-essential items. Like after we got through like cold season, I started packing up the winter stuff because I knew we weren't going to spend another winter in that house. So I had all these boxes piled around the living room. And again, I have 3 cats and a child, okay? So I'm very aware of how that might be a thing in all of this. But I had just laid down at like 11:30 one night, and I started hearing all of these thuds downstairs. So I yelled at the cats. I was like, whatever you guys are doing, you need to fucking stop, okay? Like, I love them dearly, but like, stop. And this continued for like 15 minutes, okay? And I get up and I do that thing where you like rip off the blankets and you're like, ugh. And I turn on the bedroom light and I look, and all 3 cats are asleep at the top of the stairs. Like, curled up in this weird kitty bundle. And this is weird for like 2 reasons. 1, there's some loud ass shit going on downstairs. How are they asleep? 2, if it's not them, what the fuck is going on? So I, being who I am, grabbed my gun and ran downstairs thinking that somebody was trying to break into my house. Turn on the downstairs light, and the entire living area that you would initially walk into from the front door is trashed. There are boxes everywhere. The boxes are like broken, like not broken in the sense that they like were ripped open, but broken in the sense like somebody picked them up and threw them. So the sides of the boxes were cracked, dented, collapsed, all of this. Things were spilling out. It was a whole, like it was destroyed. And so I immediately go running into my son's room because I don't see anybody. And he's in there and he is also 1000% asleep. I clear the whole house because military training, and that's what you do. There's nobody in the house. Everything is locked from the inside. There is zero explanation for this. So naturally, I assume that it's a dream, or I have obviously had a psychotic break and I'm hallucinating. Or I even consider the fact that maybe I was doing this myself. My camera just skipped. Let me know if this glitches on the actual stream because that was super unsettling. My mouth is no longer lining up with the camera. So that's, I don't like that. Okay. Don't like that at all. There's like this weird delay. Okay, so anyways, so that happens. The living room is tossed, okay? No real explanation as far as that goes, okay? I have no idea what the hell that was. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe I did it myself. Maybe I was sleepwalking. I have no idea. So rather than deal with anything, I decided to go upstairs and I go back to bed, and nothing else happened that night. Couple days later, my son, we get up in the morning, okay, I come downstairs, I'm about to make breakfast, and I look at his face, and he has got a mark on his face, like right here. Looks like somebody put a freaking cigarette out on my kid's face. And I asked him what happened, and he's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I took him to the mirror, and I showed him. He's like, oh my goodness, Mom, what is that? I have no idea. So we put some miracle oil on it. Hey, thanks, Pure Romance. Put a Band-Aid on it. It was fine. And it went away. And then after it went away, he woke up and he had another one, and it was like down here on the side. And again, it looked exactly like somebody had put a cigarette out on his face. That was about the time I first tried talking about everything on TikTok. And again, maybe I'm paranoid, maybe I'm crazy, but it felt like a warning. So, I didn't really post to anything super detailed about any of this on TikTok. I did talk to friends about it, and the more I would talk to my friends about it, the worse shit got. To the point that I was actually trying to record, I can't remember if it was a TikTok or a YouTube video, but it felt like something was watching me. I got very uncomfortable, like borderline paranoid. And so I stopped recording and I went and laid down, and I had some of the most excruciating pain of my entire life that night. Like, I was laying in bed almost on all fours. It was on the right side of my body, and it felt like somebody was trying to tear my kidney out of my freaking body. Okay. Um, to the point that I almost went to the ER. Like, it was like I was getting ready to call the people that my kid was with and basically be like, hey, I don't know when I'm going to be out. I think like something bad is happening. Like, it's not appendicitis. Like, I was going to call people and go into the ER. And as soon as I made that decision to get up out of bed, go downstairs and call people, the pain immediately went away. So again, maybe I'm freaking crazy, man. I don't know. I do know that I was in enough pain during that situation where not only did I cry, and I don't cry, but I threw up like multiple times. Do you know how much freaking pain you have to be in order to vomit? But that's where that was at, okay? And like, naturally, I correlated it to me talking about the situation, but not enough to totally scare me off because I'm a very curious person and I wanted to know what the fuck was in my house and what the hell was going on. Then a couple of other really strange things happened. So at the time, my significant other and I, we were long distance. And he was having guys weekend, doing goofy shit, and that's totally cool. But he called me at like 2 a.m., drunk dialed me. And it was super cute. Like, he would go out for guys weekend like once, twice, maybe a month. And he would get drunk and he would call me and just be like, you're so beautiful and I love you. And it was super nice. Now we live together and you don't do that shit. Anyways, she petty. But, he called and I was like half awake. Okay. And he was like, what's the name of that one dance group that you were talking about? I'm like, I have no idea. It's the middle of the night. And so I eventually, it probably took 5 minutes. I don't know. I got out of bed to try to talk to him. And I come downstairs and I'm standing in that entry point between the dining room and the living room. And I can see directly straight out the back door. And the back door had glass. It was not a sliding glass doors like the French style doors, but it had the windows in it. And there was the back porch, which was a little bitty porch, like maybe 5 feet by like 3 feet. Okay. That's probably not even the right dimensions, okay? But it was not big. It was like the size, slightly bigger than a school teacher's desk. That I can do. I can't do like actual math measurements. So. And beyond that is a tree that has a split in it. And I'm sitting there in the doorway talking to him, looking through the split in the tree. And it registers after I don't know how many minutes that somebody's looking back at me. And I screamed into the phone, there's somebody in my fucking yard. And he, drunk and half deaf, is like, oh, and when I say that, like, legitimately half deaf, okay, that's not a mean thing, it's a fact thing. So like when I scream, because of the pitch of my scream, he literally could not hear me, because it's not in a range that he can hear anymore. So like I screamed, somebody's in the back of my phone yard, and he knew enough to know that I screamed, but he had no idea what I said. He's like, what's going on? And I just kept saying over and over and over again, somebody's in my backyard. And what it was this old woman. She was standing beyond the trees, out probably 10-15 feet by a streetlight. She was an older woman. She had gray hair and a bun on top of her head. Okay. She looked like she was wearing loose fit gray pants, and it looked like she had on some sort of like wrap shawl. It could have been like a zip up sweatshirt. Again, this is dark. I'm half asleep. She's far away, and it's weird lighting because she's just on the edge of where that street lamp would fully illuminate her. So there's a lot of shadows and stuff. And I screamed this and she starts walking towards my house, dude. Okay? And she walks all the way up to that split in the tree, steps up, comes through the split, and stands directly at my back porch, staring me down. And her eyes are just over the top of the porch. So it's like this, like the porch railing, okay? Keep in mind for her eyes to be like this because of the elevation of the porch off the ground. She'd have to be really tall for a woman. Not really tall for a human, not like unnaturally tall, but she would have to be like 6 foot tall, okay? Because I'm 4'11", and that porch railing would be like a foot-ish over my head, okay? So she's looking at me like this, and here's where things get really deeply unnerving for me, because it was in that moment that I realized there's no way she should be able to see me. All of the lights are still off in the house. And I'm standing literally a room away from the door, leaning on the door jamb. There's no way that she should be able to see me. Because you and I both know that if a house is dark, you would literally have to go up to the windows and put your head against the windows like this in order to be able to see in. But somehow we were making eye contact. So I basically immediately lose my shit. I can't get my significant other to understand what I'm saying. So I hang up on him. I like run and get my gun, because again, that's the kind of person I am. My fight or flight is fight. And I came down, and by the time I came back down with the gun, she was gone. Made sure again everything was locked from the inside. All the windows were locked, everything was locked, okay? So, and at that point in time, there was like frost on the ground, like maybe half an inch of snow, if that. It was an unseasonal sort of snow or whatever. But the moral of that story is the next morning there were footprints in the snow, but the footprints didn't make any sense. There were footprints like on the edge by that streetlight where it had looked like she had stood. And then there were footprints up between the tree. And then there were footprints by the porch, but there were no step prints in between. So I don't really have a good explanation for that one. Other than, and one of my friends actually came over and like looked and walked through it because my friend is super tall, and was like, there's no way. Like, my friend was the right height to be able to look over the porch at the same level, and even she couldn't make that step through the tree the way the old woman had, as smoothly and quickly as she had. She could do it, but it was a struggle, okay? So that was super bizarre, needless to say. And things continued to escalate from there. Like less than a week later, there was still snow on the roof because it hadn't warmed up enough for it to melt. And I went to go do laundry because I had to take laundry to the laundromat, and the nanny was inside. And it's dark out because I'm a night person. And I click on the headlights and they illuminate the roof. And there's footprints on my freaking roof, man. Like person footprints with a clear, definitive shoe pattern on my roof. I spent 5-10 minutes just staring at him. Went, put the laundry in, came back, and immediately asked the nanny. I'm like, hey, bizarre question, but were you walking around on the roof? And of course, naturally, she looked at me like I was on meth and said no. So I said to her, will you come look outside at this and tell me what this looks like? And sure enough, she comes out, and she even traced the whole like pattern and walked around and all of that. There's footprints on the roof. And the way that it looked like somebody came up to that back porch rail, but again, without actually walking up to the porch rail. Like the footsteps started at the porch rail. They climbed up onto the porch rail, they pulled themselves up onto the roof, and they walked up towards the chimney. there is a definitive ass print where it looks like somebody sat down and then got up, walked along the A line, laid on their stomach, looked over the edge, and looked into the window there. That would have been my bedroom window. Looks like then they somehow jumped to the neighbor's garage roof and sat. And directly from the neighbor's garage roof is the only way that you could have possibly looked straight into my bedroom window. At some point, this person got up, stepped on the edge of the roof, left a very definitive footprint, jumped off, and then there are no more footprints. To make this extra strange in this area of tread and whatever, keep in mind, again, it is me and my nanny who are both seeing this, okay? Both seeing this. It is a clear, definitive footprint where you can see a tread mark, but in some places, there's only one shoe print. Like someone is just walking on their left leg, like just hopping along. In other places, there are two. Left, right, left, right. So, I gotta wrap this up. It's almost 30 minutes in, and I'm probably only halfway through this story. So naturally, we called the cops, and the cops treated us like we were playing a stupid joke on them, like I'm not a grown-ass woman with better shit to do in my life. So I guess like and comment for part 2. Hey, there's a little TikTok thing for you. Conveniently, though, this is YouTube, and so I don't have to do 37 videos to tell you an hour-long story. I'll just do 2. So yeah, that's kind of the first half in a very scattered, unorganized way of how things happen. Keep in mind in all of this, I was highly stressed out. I was absolutely terrified of my house. The nightmares, had gotten progressively more frequent and worse, and it felt like something in my house was constantly watching me. The thing that always resonated with me in my mind was, don't look up, it doesn't like to be seen. That was the message that I was always getting. Don't look up, it doesn't like to be seen. Especially, and this is what makes the footprints on the roof probably the weirdest freaking thing, is because I would especially get that feeling when I was standing on my back porch smoking a cigarette, and the feeling would come from, don't look at the roof, don't look up, it doesn't like to be seen. So I guess like and comment for part 2, and I'll finish out this story in a super unorganized, equally squirrely sort of way, and round it out. And I guess we'll see. Like, maybe you guys know, maybe that's a person thing, maybe that's a supernatural thing. I don't know. Maybe it is a psychotic break, I guess. Option with most votes wins. I don't know. Super bizarre. So we will, I guess, next week, at some point, I'll do a part 2 to this, and then we'll talk about some of the things that have happened since I've been in the new house, because nothing's terribly terrifying here yet, but it's not normal.